A day of prayer and reflection will be held in South Africa today to pay tribute to the country's former president, Nelson Mandela.
The current president, Jacob Zuma, has urged people to visit churches, synagogues and mosques to celebrate Mr Mandela's life and his legacy. Well, our correspondent Komla Duma is in Soweto for us now. Komla, what's been happening overnight?
Well, I think South Africans are still very much coming to terms with the reality that their beloved leader, Nelson Mandela, is gone. Today is a day of prayer and reflection. I'm in front of the Regina Mundi Church, a very important place for many South Africans. During the days of apartheid, many of the activists would gather here for secret meetings planning the end of apartheid. And in the post-apartheid era, in fact, this was where the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings took place. But today, most people coming here to reflect, to think about the memory of Nelson Mandela and the extraordinary changes that this country has been through over the past few years. My colleague Milton Nkosi visited a nearby museum to take a look at the changes South Africa has been through over the past 20 years.
So I've come to the Apartheid Museum here in Johannesburg just to reflect and to remind myself of what life used to be like when I grew up. So for example, when you arrive here, there are two separate entrances. The one entrance is for non-whites and the other entrance is for whites. Some of the signs used to say Europeans only and non-Europeans. That's how it used to be under apartheid. So if you are 20 years or younger, you probably would never have experienced this in real life. So this is the only way you can come and see what we saw when we grew up. I used to see some of these signs in towns and cities. If you ever wanted to see the scale of apartheid, have a look at its architecture on this wall. These are the laws which governed the systematic separation of a nation. There are 131 nooses here, representing the number of political prisoners who were executed under apartheid. As I left the museum, I wondered, what would have happened if they had executed Nelson Mandela? Milton Nkosi, BBC News, Johannesburg.
So South Africans will be spending much of today reflecting on the life of Nelson Mandela. This really begins the formal process of mourning the giant of this country. Over the next few days, we're going to see real expressions of grief as we have a memorial service coming up on Tuesday. Many people will gather in the 80,000-seater capacity stadium not far from here, the FNB Stadium, for a memorial service, which will, we understand, be attended by Barack Obama leading the U.S. delegation. And eventually, it will culminate in his burial in his ancestral home of Kunu. But over the next few days, again, many South Africans taking time to reflect on the contribution that Nelson Mandela has made to their freedom and indeed his contribution to the rest of the world.
Komla, thank you. That's Komla Duma in Soweto for us this morning.